Afternoon, all. Seeing that 4:30 has come and passed, and at least I see a quorum of the Finance Committee, I will call the Finance Committee of July 17th, 2023 to order and ask Dave to call the roll.
Alder Verveer.
Here.
Alder Vitiver.
Present.
Alder Evers.
Here.
Alder Madison.
Here.
Alder Rummel.
Present.
You have quorum.
Thank you, Dave. I'm just refreshing my screen here. We have quick question of order. Do I need to request approval of the minutes from last meeting?
No, we don't do that. That's not necessary.
Perfect. All right. We do have registrants for public comment on agenda item 3. We also have registrants not wishing to speak but available for questions on agenda item 10 and 11. Before proceeding, are there additional items members would like excluded for discussion? Alder Vitiver.
Number 9.
All right, we'll add number 9.
I'm sorry, President Curry, did you ask for exclusions?
Yes, I did, Alder Rummel.
Thank you. I would like to add number 3. But I guess we have registrants, but
We do, thank you. That'll be first item. So I have agenda item 3 and 9 currently. Any
And
others?
I have another
Item-
question. Is staff preparing any presentation on the TIFs districts?
I believe the only presentation we have before us will be on agenda item 14, but Dave, please correct me if I'm wrong.
We do have staff here who can answer questions on the TIF items, if that's the issue. I don't know if they have a presentation, but they're here to answer questions if you want to separate those items.
I feel personally quite acquainted with them, but maybe others are not.
Is that a separation I hear, Alder Rummel?
No, only if others wish to.
All right. If there are no others, items, Dave, help me. Do I have to read all of the items that are not separated?
No, I think you just say that 3, 9, and 14 would be excluded, and the remainder of the agenda would be on the consent agenda, and you would want a motion for that.
Thank you. I want to say ditto, but all right. Currently, we have agenda items 3, 9, and 14 that are separated. And if no further, I would entertain a motion.
Move to adopt.
Have a second.
Second.
All right. The motion is, we have a motion on the floor and seconded. Unless I see or hear otherwise, I will, oh my goodness, I keep forgetting this word. What is it?
Unanimous.
Assume. Unanimous consent. There we go. All right, that motion passes. Thank you. That will move us into agenda item number 3, Registrar File number 78717, approving the recommendations of the Community Services Committee regarding the allocation of city funds for use beginning in 2024 for school-age child and youth development programs. First, for public comment, we have Hetty Rudd from District 11, followed by Marcia Katzen-Campbell.
Thank you. I just want to first thank you guys for allowing us to be here and to speak to this agenda item. I represent Rooted at Badger Rock. It's a neighborhood center which opened in 2012 in South Madison, located off of Rimrock and Badger Road. We partner closely with Badger Rock Middle School to provide garden-based education and also with the community to offer access to urban agriculture in the form of land, education, and resources. We also provide space for the community to gather where we offer programming, and we provide space for the community to offer programming. With the expansion of our current site, in partnership with MMSD, we will be welcoming 400 new elementary school students and their families to our space, and we hope to be able to provide programming that we haven't in the past that would be geared towards elementary students, which will, in essence, be new programming for us. We're a proud member of the Neighborhood Center Coalition, which you'll hear from shortly. And as a member and a neighborhood center and a community member, I just would like to urge you to support funding the recommendation of the Community Services Committee to fund the B list, which includes a 10% increase for current programs and also would fund new programs, which are vital to the safety and well-being of our community. Again, thank you.
Thank you, Hetty. Next, we have Marcia Campton Campbell, followed by Alexis London.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. I'm Marcia Caton Campbell. I'm the Executive Director of Rooted, which operates Badger Rock Neighborhood Center. And we are a member of the Coalition of Neighborhood Centers, as you just heard from our Neighborhood Center Director, Hetty Rudd. Thank you very much for the chance to speak tonight. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the Coalition of Neighborhood Centers. All 14 neighborhood centers have come together to form a coalition whose purpose is to heighten awareness of the effectiveness of our services, speak with a unified voice about the challenges we face as organizations, and advocate for more investment and support for the work we do. We urge you to support an increase to funding for children and youth programs. On the chart you have in your packet, that increase is represented by the column entitled B List. It would invest an additional $300,000 in children and youth programs. It would also fund 10 new programs, including 4 at neighborhood centers. The other scenario before you would give no increase to children and youth programs at neighborhood centers over 2023 levels. As you all know, no increase is a cut. Everything has gone up: insurance costs, staff costs, energy costs, equipment costs. The children and youth programs are mandated by the city. Neighborhood centers must offer them. We also long to offer them. These programs cost neighborhood centers $5.3 million, and city funds cover only about 30% of that. While the city's been very upfront that they want to be a partner with us, not sole funders, and we do understand that, the gap between what the city invests and what the programs cost is big. It's about $3.6 million. Every day, we serve some of the most vulnerable kids and their families in some of Madison's most challenged neighborhoods. We serve kids in and out of school time when they need safe, welcoming, and supportive places to go and enriching and educational programming to take part in. Your support tonight for this modest yet critically important increased funding will send a powerful message as the 2024 budget is developed. We must invest more in effective programs that serve vulnerable kids and their families in some of the city's most challenged neighborhoods. I thank you very much for your time, and I'm available to answer questions should there be any.
Thank you, Marcia. Next, we have Alexis London, followed by Shadira Kilfoy Flores.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Alexis London. I'm the Executive Director at Bayview Foundation, and I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of the coalition of 14 neighborhood centers that have come together to advocate for necessary increases to youth development and youth service dollars programs across the city. You've already heard tonight from my colleague Marcia at Rooted, as well as Hetty, who have both clearly reviewed and outlined the difference between the two scenarios that were included in your packets and are in front of you for review tonight. As Marcia stated, and as you've heard from Hetty, our request is that the Finance Committee vote to fund the B list. The B list provides a nominal 10% increase over funding levels that were set in 2023, many of which are the same funding levels that were in 2014. This small increase goes a long way toward covering the significant increases that centers have incurred over the last several years due to higher wages, increased insurance cost, increased cost of living, and much more. The B list, $269,252 increase is a small step forward in investing in the essential youth services and programs that neighborhood centers are mandated to provide. We provide these programs because we love working with families and youth. We love providing them with responsive, culturally sensitive, and urgently needed services, from healthy meals and snacks during the after-school hours to trusted relationships with adults to do homework help, to test prep, to cultural field trips, to technology literacy and restorative justice work. These are just some of the programs that we conduct in our youth after-school programs. Neighborhood centers serve kids and families in need of these services in ways that ensure that the kids and the families feel heard, seen, understood, and prioritized. The B list funding includes funding for Bayview's summer study program that provides essential reading and math curriculum during the morning hours of our summer camp. The B list includes funding for Neighborhood House to conduct their elementary after-school program, which impacts more than 40 kids a year. The B list includes that 10% increase for 2023 programs to cover crucial insurance and cost of living increases. This $269,252 increase is not a huge amount. It's doable. And now is the time to start investing in this work. We really need your support with this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alexis. Next, we have Shadira, followed by Nate Score.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Shadira Kilfoy Flores, and I'm an Indigenous Chicana disabled single mother. I live in Marcia's district, District 6, and Wilmar Neighborhood Center has been an integral part of my children's lives, my own life as well. But I'm actually calling to talk more about Badger Rock and Rooted and the services that they've provided for me and my family. I'm on an incredibly fixed income. So being able to garden in a raised bed has been not only physically healthier for my family, but emotionally healthier for my family as well, being able to bond while we garden. We don't have a place in District 6 where we have access to a public garden. So being able to go to Badger Rock and learn about agriculture has been kind of a stepping stone for us in terms of community involvement. The growing food there then evolved into us being invited for community cooking classes, for us being invited to participate in community markets where I have been able to come not only as a participant and buy fresh food, artwork, jewelry, body care products from friends and neighbors. I've also been able to sell my artwork. I've been able to sell my tamales and been able to do pop-ups there. So it's been very enhancing to my family. last year I was asked, so I'm not only am I a participant there, I'm also a volunteer, and I had been asked for a number of years to be a garden mentor. So I also help garden organizer. Sorry, Marcia and Hetty for I forget these titles sometimes. I'm a garden organizer, and I've also been asked to be on their advisory board, just because I feel like my input is really valued there. My voice is really valued there, and my time has been valued there. And it's been really a backbone for our family, but also for our community. And a village elder who we made acquaintance with about 8 years ago, my son just received almost a whole graduation wardrobe from this
That's
elder.
time.
Thank you. And I cook for him. So my point is just we really appreciate the support and consideration of supporting Plan B. Thank you.
Thank you, Shadira. Next, we have Nate, followed by Tunji Lessie.
Hi there. My name is Nate Shore, and I'm the program manager here at the Bayview Foundation. And we're proud to be a part of the coalition of neighborhood centers that you've heard from so far tonight. And we feel that supporting the CSC's B-list is a huge step in helping us continue our collective work of lifting up whole families and stabilizing entire neighborhoods here in Madison. We do that at Bayview by providing comprehensive programs that take care of the whole person. And we do that because life is complicated and interconnected. Physical health correlates to mental health, work life and home life aren't always as separate as we want them to be. And living a meaningful and fulfilling life doesn't always happen in a straight line. Bayview's programs don't operate in a vacuum. We hold deep personal relationships with entire families and maintain a collaborative approach with important institutions within the community. This allows us to be both a stabilizing center of gravity that holds families together, as well as a cutting edge innovator who can get ahead of emerging problems before they become overwhelmed. A great example of this is when we were approached to develop a program to provide mental health support to one of the most stigmatized populations, and that is BIPOC teenagers. We developed our youth advocacy and support program as a broad array of specialized mental health support programming so that teens can get the support they desperately need in a place they already were and in a way that they truly wanted to get it. These supports aren't therapy, but they're relevant to wherever youth currently are on their mental health journey. It's things like gender and sexuality affinity groups that push back on restrictive gender norms. It's guided nature excursions that tap into the restorative power of being outside. It's even one-on-one sessions with trusted adult mentors that serve as a bridge to more traditional therapy interventions. At the onset of the program, one student felt so closed off that he was hesitant to give more than a one-word answer when asked how his day was going. After 2 years of patient, adaptive, and deliberate programming, this young man recently approached a staff member to ask if they could sign him up for therapy to address depression and substance abuse challenges that were causing him to have suicidal ideations. This program is saving lives, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that, and the youth want more of it. Now, this is just one example of the impact a community center can have on a family, but that's not where it ends. We do this same thing with academics, food access, social emotional learning, and even restorative justice. And the community knows this. We're the first place folks go to when something comes up in their lives, good or bad. That's why it's so important to recommend this B-list, because the community is going to come to us regardless. We just need the resources to be able to give them what they truly need. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nate. Our last registrant is wishing to speak is Tunji Lessie.
I'm not seeing anyone by that name present.
How about Tunji Lessie?
No. We do have, let's see, I guess the African Center maybe? Yeah, okay, they're raising their hand, so I'll unmute them.
Thank you, Stefan.
Okay, you should have a prompt to unmute yourself.
Okay, I did. Thank you very much for having me this afternoon. My name is Tunji Lessie, and I'm the president of the African Center for Community Development. African Center is a community, development center in the city of Madison. We're a nonprofit. I am in the, I'm talking today because of the youth program that the city is deliberating on. And this is a very, very critical program to us because of the unique challenges that the African immigrants that are in the, living in the city, face. These include education, cultural, and other things. We applied for this program, but we were not, allocated any dollars. And that is the reason why I'm advocating for the African Center, because of the critical nature of the challenges that we face. We want to be included in the B list. In actual fact, we think that the B list should also be increased because of the importance of the services to our children, the youth generally, and molding their lives to be better, to result in better in education and other things, people in the community. It is critically important that we look at these programs to help the children. And that's the reason why I am calling in today. I appreciate your efforts and I appreciate your assistance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That completes our registered comment or registrants wishing to speak. We also have Rebecca Carlin on behalf of Wisconsin Youth Company with us, available to answer questions. Elsa Catano, representing Kennedy Heights Community Center, available to answer questions. Tiffany Loomis, representing Boys and Girls Club of Dane County, available for questions, as well as Regina McConnell, representing the East Madison Community Center. Do we have any questions for registrants at this time? Alder Rummel?
Thank you, Chair and President Curry. I have a question for the president of the African Center, whose unfortunately name I did not catch.
Yes, please go ahead. My name is Adetunji Leshi, or Tunji Leshi. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I should disclose that I have been working with the African Center with the Mentoring Positives effort to create the Darbo Dream Center. So with that said, can you, sir, please tell us what some of the programming you would, what you would be doing if you were granted some of this money? Because all the other people who've spoken have already are kind of in the queue, but you're not. So help us understand, what it is that you would do if you were somehow added to the B list.
Thank you very much. Let me start by saying that there are unique challenges with our children. First is the cultural aspect of their education. Many times we need to have them in culturally sensitive environment for them to be able to understand and close the gap that we've always been talking about for the children. Second is that we have deliberated a lot with some of the partners that are helping to raise the children, the youth, the future of the children. For instance, we did discuss partner with the CEOs of tomorrow, and because we want the children to be exposed to entrepreneurship, which is the future that we are looking at for them, and for them to be conversant with, that aspect of their development. Then 2 also is that we have partnered with, again, there's an organization that is World Affairs of Seminar that bring people together, children together from all over United States. And we want our children to be exposed to this kind of a group. They actually go to Waukesha for a week or 2 where they are camped together and they socialize together and they get exposed and become friends to many of these people, which build their confidence in their environment, and they're able to excel and in whatever they are doing. Also leads to them become leaders, even in their midst, colleagues. The third area that we look at is also partnering with the UW African Studies program, because of the unique situation that we can work with them on, the storytelling and the confidence that will be built up in them, discussing with their colleagues and getting the confidence in themselves, and becoming grounded in whatever they are doing. Those are the areas that we are looking at. Again, many of these children are coming from backgrounds that are non-English speaking, low income students, and we need to be able to get them to a stage where they can benefit from the resources in the community.
Thank you. I'll probably have questions for staff later, but I don't have any more questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alderamo. Any other questions for registrants? Seeing none, I will backtrack and acknowledge that I failed to ask for disclosures and recusals. Alderamo, thank you. I think we have yours recorded. Alder Madison.
Thank you, Chair and President Curry. I just want to always disclose that the Progress Center, that my organization received funding from the city before I became Alder.
Thank you, Alder Madison. Alder Evers.
Yeah, I want to disclose I sit on the Bayview Foundation board. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, have those into consideration. I believe it's in order to move into questions for staff or presentation. Dave, help, please.
I'm not sure you have a motion yet on item 3.
Got it. Okay, I will entertain a motion on item 3, please.
Move to adopt.
All right, moved and seconded. Unless I see or hear otherwise, I will assume unanimous consent.
Nope. You got to go
Now
to
you want discussion and questions.
Okay.
Questions first, then discussion.
Thank you. Okay, questions of staff. Alder Rummel, I'm assuming you have a question for staff?
I do, thank you. Okay, I'm new to the council again. I was on here before. So this seems a little new to me, and I know that Yolanda, Jim, hi. So it seems so far in advance to be telling our 2024 selves what we're going to do on the B list. Can you help me get my head around that? Because theoretically, the mayor could put all that in her operating budget, theoretically, right? And this is then potentially not a moot point, but maybe not. Mr. O'Keefe?
Yeah, Alder, that's a That's really a very good question. And I would explain it this way, that the use of what we commonly refer to as B lists is a relic of funding processes that were conducted years ago in a way that was much more synchronized with the budget making process. So we did those in the summertime so that the conclusions of those funding processes fed into division recommendations to the mayor for consideration in developing the executive budget. As you know, we've departed some from that previous process, but we still, we are in familiar, if an unenviable position, in that we do these funding processes every year. We do different program areas each year. Each year, the requests for funding far surpass our ability to accommodate them. Each year, we're forced to make very difficult decisions about who gets funded and who doesn't. And we continue to use these funding processes to inform the development of our funding recommendations. So we would take into account the recommendations of the Community Services Committee and this B list should the council ultimately approve them or it. But the ability to deliver on the B list will hinge on the 2024 operating budget making process. And so presumably this would be an issue that would be put to the council either through the executive budget following recommendations from the Community Development Division, or failing that, members could advance their own budget amendments. But I just want folks to understand, I think you do, that merely adopting this resolution with a B list does not guarantee that the funding that would be needed to accommodate that B list will ultimately be in place when the 2024 operating budget is adopted.
Thank you, Jim.
Does that answer, Alder?
I do have a follow-up based on what you just said. So at some point you sort of hinted at that the Community Development Division is still yet to put forward your operating budget. So theoretically, that could be part of your recommendations. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I would just say, in addition, that certainly this is information that we will use in formulating our budget recommendations, but this is one of several program areas that will be subject to an RFP process, setting the stage for 2024 contracts. And so those funding processes, which occur typically once every 4 or 5 years, really they provide the opportunity for us to put to the mayor and to the council requests or recommendations for whether it's cost of living or requests for additional funding, whatever form that they might take.
And as you know, Jim, and kind of alluded to, is like a couple of years ago, mid to early in my career, we started this process where if we allocated any additional money in the budget for community development, we would let the relevant committees then choose who was to fund. And we didn't do that at the 11th hour during the budget. Well, we used to, and that was very bad. So we sort of trained ourselves to go to this mode. And I hear what you're saying about we've sort of changed it, but it's a remnant. But I guess my inclination is well, the B list is something that, that C would tell the council what they would recommend based on the work they did and research, et cetera. So then that raises a question to me is okay, I know a little bit more about what the African Center is doing than I might ordinarily because of my work with Mentoring Positives, but how could a group that's got some future thing that's coming up that might not be in the queue of your knowledge yet, how how do they get counted in a way that might, help a project along that would be, dedicated to some of those individual, recipients?
Yeah, Alder. So my colleague Yolanda Shelton Morris might have more to say about this, but I would just say to you that every 4 or 5 years, we put funding for in each of the program areas. We do this in a cyclical fashion. So each year there are 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 program areas that are subject to funding processes, and in those we shape or reshape based on feedback and input we get from service providers, from members of the community that utilize services that we're supporting, and on occasion from council members, at least through the legislative committees. We use those to shape the RFP documents and to make adjustments if we think that they're warranted to how we use those program funds. And then we make that funding available to anybody and everybody that might be interested, whether they've been funded in the past or not. We've made a concerted effort in recent years. Part of that FCI funding process, for those of you who have been around long enough to recall that, using various methods, including application workshops, to assist organizations that haven't participated in city funding in the past, get acquainted with our programs and our systems and how we work, and provide whatever technical assistance we can to help them should they choose to take advantage of these funding opportunities.
So is the short answer is they could still get into the process and apply for the RFP?
Well, this RFP process with this resolution, this resolution marks the conclusion of this particular funding process. I don't necessarily want to single out the African Center because,
but I am, we did get outreach from a lot of different people, including them.
And I just mentioned that group because they have been a regular and relatively new in the scheme of things. They've been a regular participant in numerous funding processes that the Community Development Division has undertaken. They've been successful on more than one occasion, and they've been unsuccessful in others. And I think that's the case for a good number of our community partners.
Thank you, Jim. I don't know if Yolanda has something to add. I'd be happy to listen. And hi, I've never met you before, Yolanda.
Alder, no, Jim covered it well.
Thank you. That's all my questions, Chair.
Thank you, Alder Romo. Alder Evers.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that the motion I put forward to adopt or approve the recommendations of the CSC specifically that we're voting on whether or not to include the B list. From what I understand, the resolution or the vote, the motion is about the B list, not about the previous recommendations. So, then perhaps Jim and Yolanda can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yes.
Go ahead, Yolanda.
Good evening. So Alder Evers, the resolution before you is to approve the allocation of $1.6 million and the approval of the supplemental list, the B list. So it's those two items within the resolution.
All right, thank you.
Alder Evers, since you made the motion, does your consent with that?
As long as my colleagues are in understanding that we're voting on approving both points, including the B list.
I'm seeing head nods, so yes. That is the motion before us. Alder Healy?
Thank you, President Curry. My question is to Yolanda in terms of the not having ACCD being not included in the in 2023, but also the B list as Alder Rummel or Jim alluded to. You know, these are organizations that are doing great work in the community. And if you could just walk us through the process, and if there were funding, what will that look like?
I'm sorry, Alder, if there were funding, what would?
You know, if will be funding, will there be an opportunity for them to be included in the list?
So they're not currently listed on the B list of recommendations. They would need to be added to be considered for funding. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but you know, maybe let me rephrase the question. I think based on our conversation, you alluded that, you know, because of the technical reason, they were not included in the list for either 2023 or 2024 B list, correct?
So they're not currently funded under school-age child and youth programming for 2023 for this current year. The funding process is for agencies who will be receiving funding beginning January 1st of 2024. The resolution that's before you and the recommendations that are before you, you are correct that they are not currently listed in that B list. So if they were to be considered, they would need to be added to that B list via an amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Haley. Alder Vitever.
Oh, I thought I saw Alder Evers up first, but maybe, okay. I'm happy to go. Yolanda, if you could just really quickly, very, very briefly overview of the process, RFP process, who are the reviewers, what was the deliberation, and how did they come to this recommendation? Thank you.
Sure. So we received a total of 68 program proposals across 33 organizations, requesting an aggregate a little over $3 million. Proposals were reviewed by CDD staff and colleagues across a number of different agencies: United Way, the Madison Metropolitan School District, Dane County Human Services, Public Health Madison and Dane County, the Madison Public Library, Madison Community Foundation, and the City of Madison Parks Department. We currently have an allocation of $1.6 million. And to the Community Services Committee, we presented two options of funding recommendations for the committee to consider. One recommendation prioritized an increase in funding for existing school-age child and youth programs, and the other one prioritizes the addition of new programs. So the recommendation that's included in the resolution this evening is the one that prioritizes the addition of new programs, which includes 4 new programs that are not currently being funded under school-age child and youth programming.
Pardon the interruption. Would you someone be able to share a screen just so we can follow along with what you're saying, Yolanda?
Oh, I was reading it off my notes, but did you want me to present something?
Yes, please. I don't know if it's me, but it helps me better in looking than hearing. I mean, I have it, but I'm not sure if everyone else does.
That's okay.
Is that possible?
Get myself together here. Pull it up. So if it's all right, I will just walk through the entire. Is that all right?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Sure. I'm going to share my screen here. Can I get a thumbs up? Everybody can see that? So just to reiterate, the Community Development Division released a RFP in May to seek proposals from qualified entities to provide school-age child and youth programming. And again, those services are to begin beginning January 1st of 2024. The division identified the following types of out-of-school time programs as the areas of focus. So multi-activity after school and summer programs to serve our elementary, middle, and high school age children and youth, topical or skill-focused small group programs such as leadership, culturally focused, gender-specific, STEM, LGBTQ programs also serving elementary, middle, and high school children and youth, and then late evening programs on weekends during the school year and or on various nights in the summer, serving large groups of high school and middle school age youth. As I previously mentioned, we received a total of 68 program proposals across 33 organizations, requesting in aggregate a total of $3 million. And again, those proposals were reviewed by CD staff and then colleagues across a number of different partner agencies. There's currently $1.6 million allocated to support school-age child and youth programming. This funding does not include funding for the following child and school youth program areas, which includes early childhood, restorative justice, youth employment, mentoring, or youth crisis services. Currently, the city funds organizations that provide 13 programs serving elementary school-age children for a total of $745,596, and 30 programs serving middle and high school age youth for a total of $884,931 per year. The average funding allocation for elementary programs is no more than $50,000 and no more than $30,000 for middle and high school programs. The criteria for funding recommendations is outlined throughout the RFP as well as in other supplemental documents, including the application instructions, school-age child and youth development policy paper, and the proposal evaluation rubric. All of these documents are provided to applicants via our CDD's funding website and highlighted during the required applicant workshops. The city expects to fund a package of programs that together provide an array of programs in high-need geographic areas with strong relationships with the target population. Programs recommended place a priority on equity by providing services that are culturally responsive to the needs of individuals and households of various races, ethnicities, cultures, and low-income populations. Prior to 2012, CDD conducted a funding process every other summer that included every program area funded throughout the division. Following recommendations of an extensive funding process study that Jim mentioned earlier, the division began conducting separate funding processes for each distinct program area with requirements guided by a best practice policy paper every 3 to 5 years. The first policy paper for the school-age child and youth development program area was published as a resource for a competitive application process in 2019 for funding in 2020. However, it is important to note that neighborhood centers were not a part of that funding process. In 2019, funding for the center support program area supporting basic functions of neighborhood centers was restructured into a uniform funding for each city-supported neighborhood center. And as a result, some neighborhood centers received increased funding for center support, while others moved funds from center support into their children and youth programs. As this new funding structure provided additional funds without a competitive process, neighborhood centers have not had the opportunity to request additional funding for school-age child and youth development programs since 2012. And what you see here on the screen is a reflection of those neighborhood centers and the funding that they've received in the school-age child and youth program area. So as I mentioned, we presented the Community Services Committee with 2 different options. One which would have prioritized funding to our neighborhood centers, and the second one, which would have prioritized funding to include new programs. Those programs that are highlighted in yellow on the screen are the new programs that are being recommended for funding. It is important to note for this option 2, some funding was freed up by agencies who either applied for less or did not apply at all during this RFP process. So that is what allowed us to bring in some new programs for funding recommendation. Adding new agencies also provides fresh programming to the school-age child and youth funding, including those focusing on Black youth, Hmong youth, and adding programming to a neighborhood center that serves a higher percentage of Latinx children and didn't have any child and youth city programming. And those programs, again, are Bayview with their YAS program, Black Girl Magic, Sister Circles, Dear Diary, the Her Space, and Rooted Elementary. The B list of that includes programs funded in 2023 who could potentially receive a 10% increase in funding, as you heard some of the speakers mention this evening. Exceptions to that include programs that requested an amount that is lower than what a 10% increase in funding would provide, and programs that received a significant increase in 2020 due to the neighborhood center funding restructuring. This restructuring moves significant funding from center support to programming in some cases, and as a result, they have much higher levels of funds than most other programs. This includes Vera Court Elementary and Lucia's programs. Lucia also received additional funding to support youth at Tree Lane, which is included in their current amounts. It also, the B list also would highlight new programs beyond the 4 that are already being suggested, which would include Bayview Summer Study, CEO's Elementary-Based Entrepreneurship, CEO's Middle School Entrepreneurship, the MSCR Elementary After School Program, Madam's Summer Immersive Program, Nehemiah ACE Program, Neighborhood House Elementary After School, and Urban Triage's Supporting Healthy Youth Program. And lastly, increases, the B list would also allow for increases to current programs beyond the 2023 increased amount for Bayview's elementary program, Bayview's middle school program, Central Juventud, Goodman Middle School, and Hmong Institute Elementary program. As Jim has already mentioned, we did share with the Community Services Committee that CDD has multiple budget priorities in this upcoming 2024 budget cycle. And so giving all of these priorities, we would recommend that the committee be very thoughtful about, ask the committee to be very thoughtful about who to put forth in that B list for funding recommendations. But this is ultimately the funding recommendation that the committee approved and is before you in the resolution. So I will stop sharing my screen and see if there are any questions.
Alder Vitiver.
Yeah, I apologize. I wasn't quite clear. Do we have core funding that goes to the neighborhood centers, and then this would be on top of it for specific programs, or is this in place of core funding?
That is separate. So that's considered neighborhood center support, and that is a separate pot of funds. This is just specifically for school-age child and youth programming. So neighborhood centers do receive that funding in addition to other agencies that are not neighborhood centers.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Alder Vitiver. Alder Wahili.
Thank you. And thank you, Yolanda, for your presentation. I think my question earlier, I wasn't specific, and I would like to, put this way indirectly. So based on your presentation where you alluded to that this particular funding excluded the neighborhood organization that are, helping neighborhood centers, and specifically it's for, culturally focused and other areas, and having the African Center being in Black organization and focusing on culturally focused programs, I'm just curious as to what was the reason for them not to be included in I'm not saying the 2023 list, but at least to be considered for 2024. And I think when you say sometimes, it's because of the technical issues where they didn't narrate the story on the impact and the outcome. If you can talk more about the technical challenges that they had with the application, that would be great.
Sure. So I won't necessarily be able to speak specifically to that agency, but I will say on a whole, those programs that we did not recommend for funding was either because they did not fit within the RFP criteria, were duplicative of other efforts, or the program proposals themselves were in need of further development.
With this case, the African Center needed more further development for the application. Thank you.
Yes.
Alder Haley, Alder Ramo. Okay, I had a glitch. I think I'm back. Alder Ramo.
Right. I want to just thank Yolanda for the presentation and ask that it be included in this Legistar item. Thank you.
Alder Harrington McKinney.
Thank you very much. And again, thank Yolanda for a very good presentation. It's always been the practice that there would be, when the city issues an RFP, that there would be an invitation to potential applicants to meet with the city and to learn about what the criteria are and ask questions. So my question is, did that policy follow through with the issuance of this RFP?
Yes. So we engage all of the agencies at the very beginning. We notify them to let them know that the process is forthcoming. We include them in our stakeholder engagement process, sharing the policy paper or using what we learn from them to help inform our policy paper as well as the RFP. Once the RFP is released, we notify all agencies that either are currently being funded or have expressed interest in being funded. We encourage our agencies to sign up on our website, on our listserv, so that they're notified when funding announcements are made. And then all of the applicants are required to attend an applicant workshop. And that is where we spend time going into great detail about the RFP, walking through each of the various components, answering questions that folks may have. And then we also, between myself and at least 2 or 3 of my other team members, make sure that we are available to agencies to answer questions as they may come up until the time that they submit their proposal.
Hey, thank you so very much. And just a follow-up question. The African Center did attend all of those opportunities that were put forward.
Right. Yes, it is a requirement to attend the workshop. So if you do not attend the workshop, then you have to schedule a time to meet with myself or one of my other staff members. And we do take note of that to make sure that that has been done. So if they don't attend the workshop, then we do find an opposite time to meet with them one-on-one to go over the RFP in detail.
Thank you. I'm complete with my question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands raised for questions. Moving to discussion. Seeing none, the motion before us is to approve the Community Services Committee funding recommendations for school-age child and youth development programs with the consideration of the B list. Or wording-wise, did I get that right? Okay. Alder Rummel, discussion.
Thank you, Chair. I feel like I should share that I do feel a little conflicted on behalf of the African Center because I know what they're working on and I know it's something that we'll support when we learn more about it. But I don't really feel I'm able to then step in at this 11th hour and add something to the B list, but I know that is an option. So my question, I guess it's maybe a question is, I mean, if we were to do that, hypothetically, does that is there like a limited number that this B list equals, or just so I could get some clarification?
I'm sorry, Alder, are you asking what the total amount is on the B
I'm
list?
just asking if there's wiggle room, like, at some point you or Jim said, oh, you could amend it, the B list. And before I go into that, I just wondered if there was some kind of budget for the B list.
The current budget for the B list is of the agencies that are currently listed on the B list, it totals $283,000.
I guess I'm getting at, is there some number that you'd be like, oh no, we can't afford that? Or, I mean, I guess it's a hypothetical because at the budget level later this fall, we'll decide all those things, but I just was curious.
So, Madam Chair, if I could just quickly respond to that, Alder Rummel, we're in the midst now of agency development of budget recommendations, and the budget instructions from the mayor for 2024 is that agencies are being asked to live within spending totals that are 99% of 2023 levels, with an opportunity, and it's I would say it's fair to say that the mayor is discouraging agencies from submitting supplemental requests. So the message is that this is a tight budget. We can, anybody can ask for additional funding, but we're going to need to take into account demands in this program area as well as other program areas, as I mentioned earlier, that are going to be subject to RFP processes. So there isn't a hard and fast limit, but from a practical perspective, we need to be responsible in terms of what we're asking for.
Thank you, Jim. And I just want to make sure everyone who's listening from the B list, I think I'm speaking for myself, but I believe the council would be generally in support of adding this. The question is, about, well, as I stated, thank you.
Thank you, Alder Rummel. Alder Madison.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say, first of all, can you guys hear me okay? All right. So I just want to say I am in support of the recommended 2024 allocation with the addition of the B list. I'm not in support of adding additional organizations tonight. If we add one, I think we should add them all, or we should discuss them all, which will also get us into a much longer conversation. But I want us to avoid situations that really feel unfair to the rest of the organizations that are not here tonight for those conversations and are not represented or we're not advocating for. So I just want to be just very transparent about that. Serving on Community Services Committee, I did get to witness and take part in the deep discussions about every organization. I sat through all of the presentations and actually went back and rewatched it to make sure I got it all. So I do feel that we all did our due diligence, but I'm not opposed to adding more, but I'm opposed to adding more without a fair process to add them all, I guess, because on the Community Services Committee, we worked, I think, really hard to try to be fair across the board.
Thank you, Alder Madison. Alder Evers.
Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate Alder Madison's comments here. I don't think it's appropriate for us to second guess the decisions of staff recommendations to the Community Services Committee, which voted and then pass those recommendations on to Finance. I think at this point, to us to start responding to those who are lobbying for individual organizations, I don't think this is the appropriate place or the appropriate time. I'm sticking with the recommendations of the Community Services Committee who voted in response to staff recommendations, which was part of a longer process that Yolanda just explained to us. I'd like us and like everyone on the Finance Committee to stick to that charge and either vote for the CSC recommendations or not. Let's not amend it. Let's not play around with it. Again, at some future date in the 2024 budget cycle, that's something that can be considered, but I don't think it's appropriate for us to consider it now.
Thank you, Alder Evers. Alder Rahili.
The committee recommendation. I feel the application for the ACCD was overlooked, and based on their capacity building challenges, and if there was need, and we know there's a need for this particular organization. When the presentation was given by Yolanda, it alluded to, organizations that were funded were based on culturally focused Black organizations or organizations that did not serve community center. As per Yolanda's comment, it alluded that if they had the capacity to put their application forward or it needed more development, they could have been on the not only the B list but also on the 2023. So I am not undermining anyone's effort or anyone's decisions, but I'm just asking for you to reconsider adding at least to the B list so that we don't have to go through again in 2024 and waste the staff or the committee's time. So it's just when Tunji talked to me, I specifically said that we cannot change the numbers of the 2023 allocation because taking one money from one organization and giving another money to another organization, that's not fair. And I still believe it's not fair to take one, fund from one organization and giving to another organization. But I think because of the technical reason, I think ACCD is a well-deserving organization that has been partnering with the City of Madison in terms of doing more transitional culturally literacy program, the rental assistance program, and the undocumented program with the City of Madison. So they are a young organization that really needs the help, but also need the support to specifically help those youth who are coming from, unprivileged, but also from, refugees who really need the help. So I'll urge you to reconsider to include ACCD into the B list for 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Rahili. Alder Harrington McKinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to elaborate. I could just ditto the feelings that Alder Rahili just mentioned, because when we look at culturally specific, I'm not trying to reevaluate, as my colleague Alder Madison alluded to, but I absolutely want to look at specifics in terms of culturally specific programs and practices. And so I'll not add to what Alder Rahili said, but it is really important to me that that distinction is somehow elevated and looked at. So thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, I just had some hands jump around on me. Vice President Figueroa.
I'm not going to repeat everything that I said. I mean, by now, most elders know how I stand on this discussion. We need to continue to advocate for more funding and not for individual organizations. So with that, I would like to ask staff to add me to the current resolution, please. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Vice President. Not seeing any more hands for discussion. The motion before us again is to approve the community services funding slate as proposed using the B list. And safe to assume unanimous consent, or should I go to? My internet is unstable. 1 second. Okay, am I glitching still? Am I clear? Okay. The motion before us, I'm not, unless I see or hear otherwise, assume unanimous consent. All right, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. That will move us to agenda item 9. Legislative file number 78672, authorizing the city finance director to issue a purchase order to Madison Gas and Electric for the conversion of overhead facilities to underground associated with the Public Works project on West Wilson Street, South Broome Street, and South Henry Street in the 4th Aldermanic District. Questions for Staff Alder Vitiver?
I think you need a motion first, but I'll move to approve.
Second.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. My question isn't actually about this particular project, except in the sense of, my question is what are the criteria under which we do underground wire lines? Is it only when we're approving a new development or when we have a TIF? Like, kind of what's the criteria for us getting to go to underground lines?
Sure, I can answer that question. We actually do have a adopted undergrounding policy. Primarily, it is really only in areas where we have TIF funds available. There are certain criteria where we would allow for geo borrowing to be applied to undergrounding. But given the status of our budgets in recent years, that's been kind of low-hanging fruit for things to get used for more typical city infrastructure needs. So it's generally been TIF, but the other criteria for geo use anyway would be what we've identified as gateway streets, usually into downtown, then looking at kind of some of the context of the street. If it's usually a mix of use, like a mix of residential, some commercial retail space, that sort of thing, where we see a lot of like additional traffic for activity on the street, where it would apply from a beautification standpoint. And those are kind of the key things. Yeah, the other thing I should mention is for this type of project where this will become an undergrounding district, so there will be a requirement for the adjacent properties to update their electrical services and things to receive underground service.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right, the motion is to approve. We have a second. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see or hear otherwise. All right, motion carries. Thank you. Item for discussion, agenda item 14, legislative file 78818, local preference purchasing and contract equity report.
Thank you very much. We have Mary Richards with us, who is our city procurement supervisor. We thought it'd be helpful. We get questions sometimes about the local purchasing ordinance, as well as the report that we submit to the council on it. And also wanted to give you some background on some of the contracting equity efforts that have been underway in the city for the last few years. So thanks for your time to go through that information. And Mary, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you and good evening. For those of you whom I have not yet met, I'm Mary Richards, Procurement Supervisor for the City of Madison. My pronouns are she, her. I've been with the city for 6 years and I work in the finance department. My team consists of 3 buyers and an accountant, and we assist all of the various city agencies in procuring goods and services in accordance with the Madison General Ordinances and the Finance Department's purchasing guidelines. I'm here today to provide the Finance Committee with a report on the city's local preference purchasing policy and the Contract Equity Initiative. Next slide, please. The local preference purchasing policy was adopted by the Common Council via Resolution 5943 in 2007, with the goal of increasing city spend on goods and services with businesses in Dane County. The policy provides a 1% price preference for requests for quotes and requests for bids, and a 5% scoring preference for requests for proposals for non-public works procurements. For the purposes of the policy, a local vendor is defined in the resolution as having a physical address within Dane County, as well as meeting 2 of the following 3 criteria. Minimum of 50% of employees working at facilities within the county, a minimum of 50% ownership vested in residents of Dane County, and a minimum of 15% of business sourcing from within the county. Businesses are asked to register on the city's website, after which they are listed in the city's local business directory, which is available publicly for all to use and which city staff are asked to use for their procurement activities. Next slide. Here's an example of a bid summary for a request for bids in which 2 of the 4 bids came from registered local businesses. You can see that bids 1 and 2 came in at the same dollar amount, but because bid 2 was from a registered local business, the 1% scoring preference allowed them to win the bid. Next slide. And here's an example of an RFP scoring table in which 1 proposer out of 4 was a registered local business. Proposals 1 and 2 had the same technical plus cost score total, but the 5% local vendor preference put proposal number 2 into first place, and they would be awarded the contract for this procurement. Next slide, please. Looking at the numbers for 2022, 67%, or about $236 million of the city's overall spend of $352 million was spent with businesses with addresses within Dane County. Registered local vendors account for $38 million of that. The difference is that not all businesses in the county are registered local vendors. Next slide, please. This slide looks at the total number of vendors accounted for in the previous slide. So the $236 million paid out in 2022 was paid to a total of 2,336 local businesses, of which 172 were registered local vendors. All right, next slide, please. A couple examples of issues that have come up with the local preference purchasing policy. Franchise owners who attempt to register as a local business, but they're part of a nationally recognized brand. These business owners see themselves as local businesses, but there's no provision in the resolution to make exceptions. So it would be sort of like if we accepted a local McDonald's franchise. I think we can all agree that McDonald's is not a local business, although the local franchisee is a local business, but we wouldn't want McDonald's as a whole to be on our local register. So the resolution doesn't really provide for a scenario like that. Secondly, business owners who are just outside of Dane County, but they're not in Dane County, they still feel like they're part of our local business ecosystem and they'd like to be registered. And the local preference purchasing policy does allow for reciprocity if businesses are located in a nearby county that also has a similar local preference policy that covers Dane County businesses. But currently, no counties meet those requirements. So those businesses are not able to register as local businesses in Dane County for the city of Madison. All right, next slide, please. Now I'd like to talk to you a bit about the Contract Equity Initiative, which began in 2020 following the Framework for Contracting Equity Conference, which was put on by the Department of Civil Rights. The Contract Equity team is composed of city staff from various departments, including civil rights, economic development, finance, engineering, fleet services, and human resources. Our stated mission is to advance equity for marginalized businesses in city contracting and procurement by producing measurable change in financial spending with diverse businesses. Next slide, please. In spring of 2021, city purchasing, due to the contract equity work, rolled out changes to the purchasing guidelines for middle tier purchases, which are those between $10,000 and $50,000. And the new guideline required the agency to seek at least one quote from a registered local business and one quote from a business listed in the city's equitable purchasing resources directories. Additionally, members of the contract equity team have held several virtual events in cooperation with other local governments to help local businesses understand how to do business with the city, state, county, school board, etc. And in 2022, the city released a request for information seeking to obtain information from any organization that could help the city with the goal of increasing the diversity of our vendor pool for local, women-owned, and other marginalized communities, or to help the city with our sustainability efforts. Most of the responses received for the RFI were related to sustainability, but all responses have been forwarded to city agencies who are encouraged to meet with the proposers and discuss potential future partnerships. Next slide, please. Another subgroup of the contract equity team has been working on simplifying the city's RFP bid document template, replacing legalese with plain language, and finding other ways to reduce confusion, making the bid document more accessible and inviting to all prospective vendors. An area where we have struggled is the identification of diverse businesses within our vendor records. Categorization is necessary for us to measure progress, but with 18,000 plus vendor records, it's a daunting task. Certification by the Department of Civil Rights is time-consuming, and we have limited staff compared to the number of existing vendors. This whole process could be improved by an e-procurement solution, but we currently do not have one in place. Next slide, please. In May, I, along with Norman Davis from Civil Rights and Saran Oak from Economic Development, had the honor of attending the Harvard Kennedy School Government Performance Lab's Leading City Procurement Reform Program. Madison was one of 20 cities to be selected for this year's cohort. The program consisted of several virtual coaching sessions, followed by 1 week of intensive classroom experience on the Harvard campus. Each city identified a challenge project to develop during the program, which we will work on implementing over the next few months. Madison's project is to collaborate with peer government entities in Madison to create a streamlined procurement ecosystem that can foster growth among our local businesses. Next slide. I'd like to thank you so much for allowing me to share this information with you today. I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have for me now. And I've provided my contact information as well for any questions or comments that you think of later on these or other city procurement topics.
Thank you, Mary, for the presentation. Alder Videver, question?
So first of all, thank you very much for providing this information in Legistar in advance so that we could review it in advance. It was very helpful to orient us. My question is about how you fared since making things more plain language in an effort to kind of improve accessibility. Has it worked? Are we seeing success, or is it too early to tell?
That is an ongoing effort. So the new bid template is not complete. I have weekly meetings with staff from the city attorney's office and several agencies that are that frequently have RFPs. So we are hoping that within a month or maybe two that that'll be final and ready to post and begin using. I do expect that there will be a difference, but not ready to see that yet.
Thank you. Alder Madison.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a quick question on page 11 of the presentation, the last bullet point where it says Madison's project is a collaborate, ... Are you also working or will pass or include local businesses who might, for example, businesses owned by folks of color who might want to take part eventually in this, to make sure that what's being created also makes sense to them? Does it make sense?
Yes, we're really at the very beginnings of this, but we definitely hope to have focus groups that will help to inform our project moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Madison. Alder Revere.
Thank you, President Curry. And thank you so much, Mary, for asking to be presenting before us this evening. I really appreciate you being here. First, I got excited about internal audit presenting to us and now purchasing. So thank you, Dave, for having your different units come before the Finance Committee. It's obviously been a long time since this committee has discussed our purchasing policies, although we get sole source resolutions fairly routinely, as you know, Mary. My first question is relating to the wonderful conference that you and colleagues were able to attend at the JFK School recently. Was part of that conversation regarding local preference purchasing policies? Did that come up frequently with your peers from around the country?
Yeah, that would come up fairly often. There are also frequently conversations about having targeted markets, which are in certain places allowed. So they were able to consider WBEs, MBEs, and such, and have goals for spending for those groups. But the state of Wisconsin does not allow that. So that's not something that was discussed as much for us. As far as a local preference, it was discussed a little bit, but it wasn't a focus.
Are you and your colleagues thinking of revisiting our local preference purchasing policy? Since obviously it's been quite a long time. I was around and remember vividly all the work that Dean Brasser and Randy Whitehead and Ann Zellhofer did on that. In fact, if the mayor was with us today, she would also remember it vividly. She was very much a champion for buy local at the time as an alder. Since it's been so long since we had that, and there was a subcommittee, as I recall, that worked on that. Is that something that you are thinking of renewing sometime in the coming months, or you and your colleagues think that our local purchasing policy is meeting our public policy goals and it's just fine? Thank you, pretty much.
I am very open to making changes to that policy. I do think that it is it's something that should be reconsidered every so often. The numbers used in 2007 are not going to be reasonable for where the world and the economy are in 2023 and beyond. So also, as mentioned, there's a few different issues that come up from time to time that I think could inform some changes that might be made as well.
Yes, I noted that particular slide with interest. So you're saying it's something you would welcome. Is it something that's in your work plan where you might want to do a deep dive and look at what other communities around the state and country are doing? Or
I've done some research a few different times, and I feel like the information that I've gotten has been sort of that the onus is on the council to make changes. But if that change should be initiated by my department, I would be more than open to discussing it with Dave and others to decide what the next steps would be.
I appreciate that. Obviously, you're the professionals, not us. So. So, I just don't want you to be bashful if you think that our policy is getting antiquated and is no longer serving the purpose that, again, policymakers at the time intended.
Sure.
Perhaps lastly, I want to thank you, since you joined the team, I can't believe it's been a half dozen years now. But anyway, since you joined the team, Mary, you've been very deliberate about forwarding to the council in a timely way the annual local preference purchasing report that's required by the resolution. I don't remember seeing one with the 2022 numbers. Was that done and I just missed that email? I know
The report was done. It was not sent out because we talked about having this presentation, and I think that the original anticipation was that it would happen earlier in the year, but you've been busy and had full agendas. So I do have the report ready to go in full and can send it out immediately after this.
Yeah, I don't think you have to do it tonight, but that would be great because you usually send it out in March. I believe can't remember if the resolution requires March, but I was wondering if, again, I accidentally deleted the email this year or not, but
nope, it'll be sent out very soon.
That would be awesome. Thank you. I think it's fine that you waited till you could introduce yourself and have a framework for what that report is and why you compile that annually for us. So thanks again, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Appreciate it. Dave, actually, before I yield, Madam President, Dave, did you have any thoughts on your department revisiting local preference anytime soon, anytime certain? Obviously, Mary's being exceedingly diplomatic and saying it, policymakers, should feel comfortable doing that. But I want to make sure that your central purchasing folks are comfortable as well.
Yeah, thanks for that question. And, and thanks for mentioning work plan. I would say, our resources are really focused right now on the contracting equity and, making progress on that. And really, I think that links up quite well with what we already have on local preference. And so I think the more we can, focus on making the contracting process as equitable as possible, as well as how do we link that up with local preference. I think once we get that in place and get some data in place, that would be a good opportunity after that's done to move into, okay, do we need to kind of revisit what we're doing with local preference? So, because these are large efforts, and the contracting equity has already taken quite a bit of time, and we're continuing to work on that. Mary also mentioned that we need to have data systems in place, and that's an effort that's also underway, and we need to get that in place too as we move ahead on these issues related to purchasing. So definitely it's out there. It's something we think about, but I think we have some priorities in the interim before we revisit that.
Thank you, Dave. The prioritization completely makes sense, and I concur with the current work plan. So thank you both again. Thank you, President Curry.
Thank you, Alder Revere. Alder Rommel.
Thank you, President Curry. I have two questions. One, thank you for the presentation. I was intrigued by your just recent comment and in the presentation about, people who are just outside the county, and it sounds like our requirement that the other county have to have a process that's equivalent before we could, open our doors to this sort of, next door neighbor business. And I'm wondering could you tell us more about that? Had there been thought maybe having gradations in points, or, you're in County A versus County B, or, just curious.
I think that I recall a conversation that I had with a business owner in a nearby county. It was literally just over the border. I don't remember which county it was, but they said, just because we're not in Dane County doesn't mean we're not still active in the economy there and supportive. Most of our employees actually come from Dane County, and so on and so forth. And I think at the time, I recall sort of putting together some thoughts about it, where I thought that expanding the definition of local to include the counties that border Dane County makes a lot of sense in this current world where they're all contributing. Dane County is a big area with one of the largest cities that exists in the surrounding counties. So that's what I've sort of thought of, a gradation scale where somebody is more local than somebody else could work for me as well. I think that makes sense too. But I don't have a set plan for that yet. But if we were to initiate some directed thinking about how to make changes to that resolution, that would certainly be part of that process.
Because when I think about MadRep, I don't know that we still do, but we paid in for years to be part of this multi-county economic development engine, yet we're creating this border. So anyway, I just think something that should be looked at some more. And then my second question, it just struck me, like, I can't imagine what our city vendor records are like. Is there any, as part of your equity team, a process to kind of tweak that, or how are you going to look at that?
It's a very good question. We haven't really put together a complete game plan for that. I think that we would probably put together a mailing that would go out asking folks to self-identify, and that would sort of kick off a process towards certification. What we would like to have in place is a vendor self-service program that's part of that e-procurement solution that I had mentioned. For many years, we've been trying to get our Munis system, vendor self-service, implemented, and run into hurdles here and there constantly. But having such a thing in place would make that vastly easier instead of having to in a whole other system to put letters out. And anyway, that would be something that would really, I think it would improve that process in more ways than I could possibly even list here.
Great, thanks very much.
Thank you, Alderama. Vice President Figueroa.
Thank you. Hi, Mary, thanks for the report. I just have a question and a follow-up question, so I'll just give them both at the same time. Is there a metrics or a process to bring in new vendors? And do you have any data of new vendors that we had got in the past year or something like that? Onboard new vendors, do you have a process for that?
I mean, I could go into our vendor records and pull the ones that have been added. One thing that is part of the explanation for why we have so many vendor records is that anytime somebody uses a P card at a place that it has not previously been used, that generates a new vendor record for us. So we'd probably want to weed out some of the vendor records that are only used by P card users. So I don't have those metrics at hand, but if that's something that you would like, I can make a note to put together a list for you.
I mean, I don't necessarily need, I don't need you to do extra work, but I have heard from other city staff about the benefits in whatever situation we're discussing of having a new vendor added to those major projects that we do across the city. Because sometimes, the existing ones has too many jobs already and they can take our thing. So I was just wondering if, because based on the cost of service and construction costs, if we are being proactive, if we are proactively looking for new vendors that we can put through our processes to open more availability for the projects that we have in the pipeline. That's really what I was going with this. I'm not wanting to give you more work, but if we have a policy or working on something like that.
Central purchasing does not have a current process for reaching out to new vendors specifically. We do post all of our formal solicitations. So that's the request for quotes, bids, and proposals. All of those are posted on 2 different websites, and any organization can subscribe to the city's postings for services or goods that are relevant to them. So we do get new vendors that way sometimes. And then agencies are encouraged to reach out to any businesses that or organizations that they're aware of that we have not done business with before, and invite them into the bidding process as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, not seeing any other questions. Thank you, Mary, for your presentation.
Thanks for your time.
That brings us to the end of our agenda, and I would entertain a motion.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right. And unless I see or hear otherwise, I will assume unanimous consent. Thank you all, and have a good rest of your evening.